In the days to follow, all trace of the Galinos faded, and they pushed deeper into the mountains. By fires of highland driftwood, pale as bone, they crouched in silence, while the flames yawed in night winds, ascending those stony draws. The kid sat with his legs crossed, mending a strap with, and all he'd borrowed from the ex-priest. Tobin and the frockless one looked on as Hugh worked. "You've done this afore," said Tobin. The kid wiped his nose with a swipe of his greasy sleeve and turned, the piece in his lap. "Not me," he said. "Well, you've the knack, more so than me. There's little equity in the Lord's gifts." The kid looked up at him and then bent to his work again. "That's so," said the ex. "Look around you. Study the judge. I done studied him. Mayhaps he ain't to your liking. Fair enough. But the man's a hand at anything. I've never seen him turn to a task but what he didn't prove clever at it." The lad drove the greased thread through the leather and hauled it taut. "He speaks Dutch," said the ex-priest. "Dutch. Aye." The kid looked at the ex-priest. He bent to his mending. "He does, for I heard him do it. We cut a parcel of crazy pilgrims down off the Llano, and the old man in the lead of them. He spoke right up in Dutch like we were all of us in Dutch, and the judge give him right back. Glanton come near falling off his horse. We none of us knew him to speak it. Asked where he'd learned it. You know what he said." "What did he say?" Set off a Dutchman. The ex-priest spat. "I couldn't have learnt it off 10 Dutchmen. What about you?" The kid shook his head. "No," said Tobin. "The gifts of the Almighty are weighed and parceled out in a scale peculiar to himself. It's no fair accounting, and I don't doubt but what he'd be the first to admit it, and you put query to him, bold-face. Who? The Almighty? The Almighty?" The ex-priest shook his head. He glanced across the fire toward the judge. That great hairless thing. You wouldn't think to look at him that he could outdance Theodovel himself now, would thee? God, the man is a dancer. You'll not take that away from him. And fiddle. He's the greatest fiddler I ever heard, and that's an end on it. The greatest. He can cut a trail, shoot a rifle, ride a horse, track a deer. He's been all over the world. Him and the governor he sat up till breakfast, and it was Paris this and London that, in 5 languages. You'd have give us something to have heard them. The governor's a learned man himself, he is, but the judge, the ex-priest shook his head. It may be the Lord's way of showing how little store he sets by the learned. Whatever could it mean to one who knows all? He's an uncommon love for Thecoman man, and godly wisdom resides in the least of things, so that it may well be that. Thevoov, said the Almighty, speaks most profoundly in such beings as lives in silence themselves. He watched the kid, for let it go how it will, he said. God speaks in the least of creatures. The kid thought him to mean birds, or things that crawl, but the ex-priest watching, his head slightly cocked, said, No man is give leave of that voice. The kid spat into the fire and bent to his work. I ain't heard no voice, he said. When it stops, said Tobin, you'll know you've heard it all your life. Is that right? Aye. The kid turned the leather in his lap. The ex-priest watched him. At night, said Tobin, when the horses are grazing and the company is asleep, who hears them grazing? Don't nobody hear them if they're asleep. Aye, and if they cease their grazing, who is it that wakes? Every man. Aye, said the ex-priest, every man. The kid looked up, and the judge, does the voice speak to him? The judge, said Tobin, he didn't answer. I seen him before, said the kid, in that Kodachas. Tobin smiled. Every man in the company claims to have encountered that sooty-souled rascal in some other place. Tobin rubbed his beard on the back of his hand. He saved us all. I have too. Give him that. We come down off the little Colorado. We didn't have a pound of powder in the company. Pound. We'd not a dram hardly. There he sat on a rock in the middle of the greatest desert you'd ever want to see. Just perched on this rock like a man waiting for a coach. Brown thought him average. Might have shot him for one if he'd had aught to shoot him with. How come you two have no powder? Shut it up all at the savages. Holed up 9 days in a cave. Lost most of the horses. We were 38 men when we left Chihuahua City, and we were 14 when the judge found us, mortally whipped, on the run. Every man jack of us knew that in that God-forsook land somewhere was a draw or a cul-de-sac, or perhaps just a pile of rocks, and there we'd be driven toe-a-stand with those empty guns. The judge, give the devil his due. The kid held the tack in one hand, the awl in the other. He watched the ex-priest. We'd been on the plain all night, and well up into the next day. The Delawares kept calling Haltsant, dropping to the ground to give a listen. There was no place to run, and no place to hide. I don't know what they wanted to hear. We knew the bloody niggers was out there, and speaking for myself, that was already an abundance of information. I didn't need more. That sunrise we'd looked to be our last. We were all watching the backtrack. I don't know how far you could see. 15, 20 miles. Then about the meridian of that day, we come upon the judge on his rock there in that wilderness by his single self. Aye, and there was no rock, just the one. Irving said he'd brung it with him. I said that it was a mere stone to mark him out of nothing at all. He had with him that self-some rifle you see with him now, all mounted in German silver, and the name, that each of it set with silver wire under the check piece in Latin, E.T. in Arcadia Ego, a reference to Thelethal in it, common enough for a man to name his gun. I've heard sweet lips and hark from the tombs in every sort of lady's name. His is the first and only ever I seen with an inscription from the classics, and there he sat, no horse, just him and his legs, crossed, smiling as we rode up, like he'd been expecting us. He'd an old canvas kit bag and an old woolen Benjamin over the one shoulder. In the bag was a brace of pistols and a good assortment of specie, gold and silver. He didn't even have a canteen. It was like, you couldn't tell where he'd come from. Said he'd been with A-Wagon Company and fell out to go it alone. Davy wanted to leave him there. Didn't set well with his honor, and it daunted to this day. Glanton just studied him. It was a day's work to even guess what he made of that figure on that ground. I don't know to this day. They've a secret commerce, some terrible covenant. You mind, you'll see, I'm right. He called for the last of 2 pack-animals we had, and he cut the straps and left Thualids to lay where they fell, and the judge mounted up, and he and Glanton rode side by side, and soon they was conversing like brothers. The judge sat that animal bareback like an Indian android, with his grip and his rifle perched on the withers, and he looked about him with the greatest action in the world, as if everything had turned out just as he planned, and the day could not have been finer. We'd not rode far before he struck us a new course about 9 points to the east. He pointed out a range of mountains, maybe 30-mile distant, and we pulled for those mountains, and none of us asked what for. By then Glanton had given the particulars of the situation in which he'd installed himself, but if being naked of arms in that wilderness, and half of all, Apacheria in pursuit worried him at all, he kept it to himself entire. The ex-priest had paused to rekindle his pipe, reaching into the raw fire for a coal, as did the Red Scouts, and then setting it back among the flames as if it had a proper place there. Now, what do you reckon it was in them mountains that we set out for? and how did he Comero know of it? How to find it? How to put it to use? Tobin seemed to frame these questions to himself. He was regarding the fire and pulling on his pipe. How indeed, he said. We reached the foothills in the early evening and rode up a dry arrow end, pushed on, I guess, till midnight, and made camp with neither wood nor water. Come, Merrinan could see. Them on the plain to the north, maybe 10 miles out. They were ridden 4 and 6 abreast, and there was no short supply of them, and they were in no hurry. The judge had been up all the night by what the vedette said, watching the bats. He would goop the side of the mountain and make notes in a little book, and then he would come back down. Could not have been more cheerful. 2 men had deserted in the night, and that made us down to 12 and the judge 13. I gave him my best study, the judge then and now. He appeared to be a lunatic, and then not. Glanton, I always knew was mad. We left out with the first light, up a little wooded draw. We were on the north slope, and there was willow and alder and cherry growing out of the rock. Just little trees. The judge would stop to botanize, and then ride to catch up. My hand to God, pressing leaves into his book. Sure, I never saw the equal to it, and all the time the savages in plain view below us. Right in on that pan. God, I'd put a crick in my neck. I couldn't keep my eyes off of them, and they were 100 South Sif. They were 1.